So grievous is the situation in the Congo that you have the unprecedented decision on the part of the Security Council to see sexual violence as a breach of international peace and security. The only time that has happened in the history of the Security Council on issues other than direct conflict and war is in the case of HIV and AIDS and climate change. And now sexual violence occupies that particular part of the trinity of incredulity. We have to be engaged in that way, and there is an agenda here for Canada to follow, and we've woefully neglected it. Number 6, everybody talks about the need for an increase in MONUC. You cannot protect the lives of women. You have Security Council resolutions which are etched with fervor, as though for a moment they had listened to Eve Ensler. And they talk of the need to protect the women. And then it is never given expression in the field. And part of the reason for the absence of expression is that you can't handle it with 17,000 peacekeepers. So why are countries like Canada not arguing for increased peacekeeping complements? And if we ourselves cannot provide it, why is it not possible to do the training of peacekeepers, which Canada is clearly in a position to undertake? This nonsense of the 3,000 additional peacekeepers, it's like a reductio absurdum of international diplomatic activity. We buy time with promises that we never intend to honor. It's just revolting. It is a matter of intense revulsion. I mean, one feels so angry. I listen to the cries and the language and the tremendous force of these words. And I think to myself, how does the world not respond? Eve has appeared twice now, I think, before the Security Council. They've listened to the specifics that she conveyed this evening. What are they made of? What is happening here? What does it do to the moral anchor of the world community? And number 7, we have to identify that mineral trail that Eve talked about and that others are beginning to document. And shame and name the companies that are purchasing the tin and the gold and the coltan for microchips and computers and cell phones. We have back amidst us, thank God, a man who is more familiar with this process than any other in the world, and that's Bob Fowler. Bob Fowler did the blood diamonds construct, which eventually ended the war in West Africa. He saw it through from beginning to end and actually set out the document. So we have, as in so many other areas, something on which we can call. We have tremendous experience and knowledge. And again, this is something which Canada should insist on at the United Nations. If we're running to be on the Security Council, let there at least be some credibility attached to our approach. You see, that business of the minerals is really important. If I may make a point which always eats at me just a little, the heading of our session is "Until the Violence Stops, How Canada Can Help End the Use of Sexual Violence as a Weapon in War." But you see, sexual violence isn't a weapon in war. Sexual violence in the Congo is a strategy of war. The marauding militias have understood that the cheapest and easiest way to subdue entire communities and to get your hands on the minerals that you want to extract and sell to sustain your perfidious activities, that comes through raping and humiliating the women of the Congo. And they have understood, as many others have not understood, that this is a strategy which constantly works. It's not just the incidental horror of rape as a weapon of war. It's a carefully conceived, make no mistake about it, strategy where you rape women and you engage in sexual violence and you do it in the presence of their families and you subdue entire communities through the violence and humiliation of the women, who are, after all, the center of the society. And therefore, one has to look at the strategy as one of the most odious and offensive features of contemporary life. And the last point I wanted to make is that there's something going on at the UN to which we pay very little heed, and yet it would be so important in dealing with issues like this. There is emerging at the United Nations, I can scarce believe it, an actual new international agency for women. It was recommended unexpectedly at the end of 2006 by a high-level panel. It was then, over a period of long negotiation, endorsed by the General Assembly at the end of last year. The nation-states are now in intense discussion over how the architecture will be designed, how the governance will work, how much money it will receive, the Under-Secretary General it will have, the operational capacity on the ground, the normative capacity with international conventions. It's an astonishing momentum around the creation of an agency. I've never seen anything like it. I've spent a good deal of time lobbying individual ambassadors and talking to them about it. I sat down yesterday afternoon with Susan Rice, who's now there for the United States, as you will know, and it's wonderful to recognize that in most parts of the world, except little objections from some of the so-called G77, there is a growing recognition that the international community's record on women has been so abysmal, so lamentable, that you must have an international agency with power on the ground. I can't tell you how many lives of women would have been saved from death through HIV and AIDS had we had a woman's agency ready to raise these issues. And as I stand here, it would make a difference in dealing with sexual violence if there were a powerful international agency. And incredibly enough, it's going to happen, I think, before the end of this year. And I bet there are a lot of people in this room who don't know that there is prime ministerial approval for the agency to emerge in the United Nations, approval for Canada, and yet there is not the kind of intense engagement in the political process in Ottawa, although there is some engagement, I can assure you, in New York, around something that can dramatically alter the lives of women in ways many have dreamed of. This business of the patriarchy is truly a poisonous reality. All of this is driven. All of it is driven by gender inequality. All of it. I increasingly believe that the struggle for gender equality is the single most important struggle on this planet. You cannot continue to marginalize 52% of the world's population and to engage in such unutterable sexual violence as an expression of gender inequality and expect to approximate social justice or equity. It just won't happen. And I share with Eve the sense of the courage and resilience, optimism and generosity of spirit that suffuses this persona of the Congolese women. They are magnificent, and it is one of the most unbearable pieces of international criminal delinquency that we do not show with them the kind of solidarity that can permit them to inherit